This week on Overdrive, two bold electric SUVs, the Mahindra XEV 9e and the Tata Harrier EV battle it out. Plus, we take a look at the Odysse Sun, an affordable electric scooter promising comfort, range and practicality. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini Dutt. This week on the show, we have two bold electric homegrown SUVs, the Mahindra XEV 9e and the Tata Harrier EV, going head to head with striking design, then smart practicalities, smart packaging, as well as tech-rich cabins. Now, we're here to find out whether both of these really can garner their premium price tag. Which one actually edges over the other? Let's find out.
It's genuinely commendable that for about 30 lakhs, you can get cars like the Tata Harrier EV and the Mahindra XEV 9e from homegrown Indian car makers that are as good as anything else in the world. But today we're here to find out which of these is the best and how do they perform, and to be honest, which one should be your pick. The Harrier EV is familiar following the proportions and substantial presence of the ICE model. A lot of this is down to it being a significant 225mm wider and 46mm taller than the XEV 9e. The Mahindra conversely makes a big show of it, even though it's shorter and narrower than the Harrier. It's bold and stands out, helped by the long coupe silhouette that seems to enhance the fact that it is 182mm longer than the Harrier EV. Now with the Harrier EV, it's great that even with this dual motor version, you do get a small 35-litre space to put stuff in the front of the car. But with the Mahindra, it's really a much more usable space, and this is one of the attributes that you have, or advantages of having a fully born electric architecture. You have a deep 150-litre frunk and you can genuinely use it. It's not just for cables or some other small stuff like in the Harrier. You have enough ground clearance in both. The Harrier EV has 205mm and the XEV 9e has 207mm. Now the XEV has a more spacious boot as well. Now considering how big and large these panels are on these cars, this powered function really does help in both. And I must say that the space is well managed with its flattish kind of floor. Really is useful. Yes, the height may not be all that great considering the sloping roofline, but you will get some decent luggage into the 663 litres that the XEV 9e has. Now coming to the Harrier, it's again sort of ICE-derived platform. Does mean that there are some compromises and the boot is one of them. So you'll notice that the spare wheel is kind of there but packed in like this, which raises the floor. And generally the entire space is a lot lesser than the ICE Harrier and also a lot lesser than the XEV. It's about 502 litres. Now both the spaces are calculated right to the roof. Now both of these are fairly expensive cars, especially the top end versions that we have here. But in the XEV, as soon as you step inside, it seems to make you feel like a car that's closer to the price that it's asking you for it. And yes, this full screen layout does have that sense of occasion to it. But it's the smaller details that really give you that slightly better feeling of quality in the cabin. Now to start with, the soft surfaces seem a bit more apparent than in the Harrier. For example, all of these panels are soft. And to be honest, there may not be too much more of it than in the Tata, but it's just placed, I think, a little bit better. Similarly, the details, like I mentioned, the stitching that you have here, the kind of tactile controls for the plastic switchgear that is there, there's not too much of it. And generally that also continues with the kind of seat upholstering that you have and the kind of fit and finish, at least in the top half of the dash. The Harrier EV has many soft panels and uses contrasting finishes better. Just like the outside, the dash is closely derived from the ICE Harrier, so it's a well finished space that seems as well put together as the Mahindra, just not as apparently. The white and blue theme gives it a fresh touch. The Harrier EV is the easier cabin to interact with on the move, but we wish both cars had much less gloss black on the inside than they do. The plastic quality and finish in the lower reaches of the dash could also be more consistent in both. The Harrier EV and XEV 9e are especially generous with their tech. You have all manner of functions built in, although the most useful ones are the rear camera in the Harrier EV and the head-up display in the Mahindra XEV 9e. The screen layout differs quite a bit. The Mahindra gives you three 12.3-inch screens, while the Harrier EV has a 12.25-inch driver's display and a large 14.5-inch Samsung OLED touchscreen. The Tata's large screen real estate is a positive, and it's also the more thoughtfully laid out interface. The ADAS, climate and sound settings are easier to access than in the Mahindra, for example. The Mahindra is the more responsive one though. Inputs register quicker and it also seems to fire up your phone a little bit quicker. The main advantage of the passenger screen is that it lets you access social apps and content on the move, which the Harrier can only do at a standstill. As for the driver displays, the Tata has more information, but the Mahindra is better laid out. The fonts are a bit too small in the Harrier EV. The XEV90 conversely innovatively gives you a good sense of what's happening quicker. Having said that, the Harrier also gives you the slightly better or more supportive front seat. But now they have improved this steering sort of arrangement in the Harrier. The horn is a bit easier to use. It's also been beefed up, but it's nowhere near as nice to use as in the XEV90, where you have the horn controls right on the sides. Tata used to do this earlier. For example, the Punch still has it, where you have buttons for the horn right here. And you do tend to sort of hit these switches quite a bit while driving, which doesn't happen in the Mahindra. That being said, these cars are safe. Both get 5-star ratings and a whole host of safety features. The Harrier also gets the transparent bonnet function and has the clearer cameras. As for the level 2 ADAS system, the one on the Mahindra is a bit more intrusive with its alerts than the Tata. But you can fully turn off this system unlike the Tata. Now the Mahindra has a 2775mm wheelbase, that's about 34mm longer than the Harrier. But you might think that with the coupe shape of the XEV90, it may not have the better backseat. But it's not quite that. You'll notice that with the long tail that it has, headroom is not very different from the Harrier. And you will notice them, say, if you're closer to 6 feet tall. But for my height, I'm about 5'7", and there's really not much to choose between the two cars in that respect. Now, where the XEV9e continues to score is in the width of the seat. Even though it's a narrower car than the Harrier, the seat itself is slightly wider. So 3 abreast is good in both cars, but here the middle passenger will be just a little bit better off. And that's also helped by the flat seat cushioning that the XEV90 has. That's a very typical Mahindra trait. You see that here as well. The larger sunroof gives you a great sense of space in the XEV90, and you also get a wireless charger and an integrated device holder. Both cars give you sunshades and high power Type-C ports. We also think the B-pillar mounted vents in the Harrier are a bit more effective. Now coming to the legroom, of course, both give you this boss function. Here it's manuals and you don't get the option to tilt the seat forward in that sense. In the Harrier, it's powered throughout, so it's a lot easier to use on the move. And I also like the fact that you can actually recline the seat to a genuinely comfortable angle in the XEV90. Now coming to the bits that the Harrier does better, while the 9e does give you this middle headrest, the Harrier has those foldable sort of headrests and they're genuinely quite comfortable. Now me personally, I don't quite like the cushioning in the Harrier. I think the thigh support could be slightly better compared to the 9e.
Well, we're not done with this story just yet. We have plenty more criteria to judge these two on. Come right back after this very short break.
The XEV90 has the larger battery pack at 79 kWh using Blade battery cells sourced from BYD. The Harrier EV uses prismatic cells but is slightly smaller at 75 kWh. The Mahindra's born electric architecture and efficiency-focused shape seem to make it more efficient, especially at higher speeds. These factors mean that it has a range advantage in the city over the Harrier EV, which grows in highway driving. In a real-world range test, as you can see here, the XEV90 did better than the Harrier EV both in the city and on the highway. The Tata has the more dynamic range indicator, which helps you plan charging better. The XEV90 can DC fast charge at 175 kilowatts, while the Harrier EV can do up to 130 kilowatts. When you do find a fast enough charger, this will make a difference. The Mahindra more practically also does AC charging quicker at 11 kilowatt against the Harrier EV 7.2 kilowatt. Now once you start driving these cars, especially in the kind of conditions that we've driven in today, typical Mumbai traffic, urban scenarios, you will find that it's the Harrier that's a little bit easier to place. You can see out of it a little bit better, just the way the bonnet is shaped. This A-pillar is quite intrusive in both, but a bit less in the Harrier. Same with the mirrors. Both cars have quite large mirrors, which again sort of get in the way. And then of course you have this rear camera setup, which has been much talked about in the Harrier. And I must say that it really does help, especially with all the views that you get. It's a good addition. With its dual motor setup, the Harrier EV is the more potent car here. It makes 158 PS from its front motor and 238 PS from the rear, with combined torque being a significant 504 Nm. The XEV9e is some way behind at 285 PS and 380 Nm. It's no surprise that the Harrier EV did a 0 to 100 kmph run in 6.3 seconds and the XEV9e in 6.9 seconds. Now the Harrier in this all-wheel drive dual motor variant has a distinct power and torque advantage over the XEV9e. You still get that only in a single rear-driven variant. This shows in our tested 0 to 100 kmph times, the Harrier EV is quick by any yardstick, doing it in 6.3 seconds, while the Mahindra is a little way behind at 6.9 seconds. But once you start driving these, it's the Mahindra that feels a little bit more energetic and a little bit more agile in that sense, a little bit more responsive. And that's really down to how these companies have tuned their sort of EV powertrain. Now in the Harrier, there's quite a bit more heft that's going on in the system. And the responses have been toned down a little bit, probably to make life easy for you if you aren't used to this kind of power. The regen systems work similarly in both with 4 levels, but we found the calibration to be a bit more intuitive in the Harrier EV. You can stick it in level 1 as an all-purpose setting. In the XEV, there is a touch less braking effect at this setting in some situations, while level 2 can be quite strong in steady driving. There is a one-pedal mode in the Mahindra, but it takes a bit of getting used to if you are coming from an ICE vehicle, and again could be better calibrated as far as these systems go. So you find that the Mahindra is a lot more eager to turn in. It does turn in these kind of flyovers or even corners. It's managing its weight a lot better, leaning in a lot more progressively, a lot more predictably, which makes for a much more enjoyable experience. In the Harrier, you have to always be a bit mindful of the car's mass. But here in the Mahindra, you can really hustle it a little bit harder and still feel that you're in control. The Harrier EV makes up some ground with the added grip that its all-wheel drive system offers. The system only cuts in when necessary and the integration is smooth, so the Harrier feels more predictable when you are on the power and adds a sense of security that feels helpful here. The Tata is more confident under heavy braking as well. It stops better as our numbers show, but it's also more stable in these situations. The XEV can lose a bit of composure here even though it actually dives less. Now if you are looking for an EV that you want to be driven around in, the Harrier EV starts to make a lot of sense in that regard when you notice just how plush it rides. Now remember, we're driving the top spec versions of both cars and both of them ride 19-inch wheels. Now with that in mind, and considering that EVs are generally heavier, the suspensions need to be firmed up a little bit to manage all that weight, they're not the most comfortable cars around. The Harrier EV and XEV9e come with quite advanced suspension setups to counter this. These are multi-link setups, the kind you usually found only in more expensive European cars until very recently, and they also get frequency selective damping. Now the Harrier sort of changes that perception. It's genuinely plush in the way that it handles our roads. So say you're on a fairly smooth road such as this one, you notice the car remains a bit steadier, a bit flatter than the XEV9e on these kind of roads. And then when the roads do get rough, yes, the suspension is noisy in both, a little bit more in the Tata, but the way this car sort of cocoons you and keeps you away from all the bad stuff that's happening outside is genuinely commendable. You really don't notice the bumps. Definitely not as much as the XEV9e because that is quite firmly set up given that it's a slightly sportier car. Now, even though both these cars have that tough, rugged feel that their brands are known for, this one just keeps you a little bit more comfortable. In the Mahindra, you get thrown around a little bit more, which, say, if you're going over an extended set of bad patches, can get a bit tiring after a point. The Mahindra XEV9e and Tata Harrier EV run each other close. The two may seem similar on paper, but they appeal to very different sets. The Harrier EV is the more practical car, which will appeal to those prioritizing comfort and a calm, soft driving experience. The XEV9e brings with it a greater sense of occasion. It's quite engaging to drive and will be great for those who want an EV but don't want to let go of the traditional sense of excitement a car brings. The Harrier EV's trump card is its price, which lets it edge out the XEV9e. At Rs 29.48 lakh, you get all-wheel drive for 50,000 less than the similarly equipped Mahindra at Rs 31 lakh. The equivalent rear-wheel drive Harrier EV is a massive Rs 3 lakhs less.
From electric SUVs to an affordable electric scooter, you'd want to know more about the Odysse Sun after this very short break.